from my point of view, one strategy of the response to the misuse of religion in politics and nationalism, chauvinism, and extremism, and other threats to democracy, is to create a democratic habit, especially in the younger community, younger generation. This process can proceed as a practicing Christianity, but differently, mainly as a corrective experience against anti-democratic tendencies available in everyday social experience. This is my thesis, main thesis. And in order to develop, explain, and justify this thesis, I will first show what can be understood by a democratic habit. Then I will analyze and interpret in more detail an example of the practical implementation of building such a habit. Next, I will try to explain within this context the limits in which one can speak of a corrective experience against anti-democratic tendencies. And I will try to conclude by considering some arguments against this thesis that one can propose also. So first, democratic habit. Well, it is specific to democracy that even in normative characterization, its normative characterization, it cannot remain simply a prioristic. This meta-normative limitation make it possible to see democracy primarily as a field of social praxis. Consequently, the hallmarks of democracy, such as rule of law, constitute the final stage of the actions of the practice, and then are handled in legal and official forms that remain in the service of this social praxis. They fall on a spectrum between the freedom of all and the resulting obligations of everyone. Of course, we have here a problem, a philosophical problem. The endless debate between rationalist ethics and virtue ethics concern whether rational recognition of obligation is sufficient for their realization, or whether such a recognition needs to be supplemented somehow by a habitual and disposition to do what one has recognized as an obligation. But regardless of the moral theory problem, it is possible to define a democratic habit as a habitual reliance on persuasion instead of force, coupled with equally habitual contribution of one's own, even minimal contribution to society, if only because one enjoys the freedom-protecting laws that regulate social life and other goods acquired and preserved by society. The question is how we can train a democratic habit in this context. And now I would like to refer to the example of an experience, of an ongoing in 2023 international interdisciplinary and interreligious seminar on the threats to democracy and Christian response to them. I will try to analyze some steps from this seminar and show how we can practice democracy this way, building a democratic habit, and then I will try to, explain if we actually achieve what we want this way. Okay, so the seminar is mainly addressed to students, doctoral students, and interested non-academics. The seminar hosts participants from Germany, Poland, Hungary, and Georgia, as well as from Turkey and India. It consists of an academic part as well as cultural part. In the academic part, the method of cooperation between the participants and leading professors is crucial to the democratic habit. And about this, I will talk more and analyzing this a little bit. The whole thing consists of 3 meetings of 3 to 4 days each in Germany, Poland, and France. Between the meetings, students and doctoral students work on the topics covered under the guidance of their academic supervisors. Now, this organizational framework is actually the only authoritarian element present in our seminar. And it is important because the first experience that our participants have is that there is still a place in democracy for authoritarian elements. But that means the plan, the schedule, the framework. But the criterion that differentiates whether we are dealing with a democratic or non-democratic community is whether the elements of authoritarian structure serve everyone and the entire community or only themselves, their own replication and their own and thus the organizers of the authoritarian armor. And this reflection is the initial experience of the seminar participants, that there is indeed a place for some authoritarian elements in each democracy that is not so much discussed. The next step, democracy that's very easy, is about participation. And here, everyone who can and who wants and can participate in this seminary should prepare the topic in line with the main subject of the seminar and make this contribution available well in advance relative to the date of the every step of meeting. So everyone has his or her participation in the democratic community. Before anyone exercises the rights and goods available in a democratic seminar, for instance, the parts of cultural program, they are asked to consciously and actively contribute. Next step. According to the definition of democratic habit as a habitual resilience or persuasion instead of force. Well, to give this normative qualification a practical realization, seminar participants present their topics in pairs, one after other. And at this stage of democratic habit formation, the most important thing is that the topics are juxtaposed as a matter of principle as contradictory, at least, or simply paradoxical. This is how we treat the topics and the participant. The goal is for participants not only know how, but to experience in a concrete relationship that difference, broadly defined, including differences of opinion, should not lead to hostility, but to be an opportunity for conversation, which this conversation is actually autotelic. Conversation does not necessarily lead to change of mind or a victory in discussion, but simply to a better understanding of the difference and whether it is about the rational difference or not. Okay. After listening to speakers, everyone presents the thesis. The course of conversation is divided into 2 phases. The first is a question phase. All seminar participants have a chance to ask what is important or unclear to them. No judgments or comments are made at this stage. Instead, the idea is to let ignorance resound and recognize that ignorance or lack of sufficient understanding is something ordinary for democracy. And there is no need to rush, to find a camouflage for this situation or adopt a kind of, makeshift solutions. The value lies in asking questions, sit maneat quaestio. So there are no immediate answers. The questions are written down on a large sheet of paper, and they wait for their turn. Next phase is crucial for our method of work. This is a murmuring phase. We are not contra murmurandis, we are for them. In this part, after listening to voices, to different voices, and asking publicly, writing down questions, participants divide into groups of 2 or at most 3 persons, and in these groups, they talk among themselves, taking up of the written questions they can look at, all of them or one of them. And this stage of building democratic habit shows that in the face of existing questions, public speech should not always be the behavior of the first choice. It is appropriate to consult one's opinion in a bit more narrowly in front of people whose presence is not a kind of social curt and responsibility, but in a not so large community to discuss the problem. This experience is about experiencing democracy as a matter of opinion, but not all kind of opinion, but also consulted, modified, changed, and perhaps even kept to oneself opinion. And the last, not the pre-last stage of the seminar is the public presentation by the representative of each discussing small groups of the opinion consulted, elaborated in the work. And in this moment, the public discussion is starting. Discussion in which both holy indignation and defensive attitudes are avoided. Normal, classic democratic discussion. In some groups, there is also an emphasis on the role of metaphor in the sense of Davidson and Rorty. We are trying to show that not only good argument matters, but also the good metaphor that can inspire, not only persuade, but also inspire people. This is all the Nietzschean and then Rorty and Davidson talk about living and death metaphors. I can explain it better if you need later. Okay, but one can ask, what is Christianity in all of this? Why Christianity practiced differently? So I have 2 ideas. First, it is expressed, the whole situation, in the non-reduction of Christian experience to religious worship performed by priests. We are not reducing Christianity, as it is not always, but usually, to the act of religious behavior, religious cult. And this is important. Part of this practicing Christianity, but differently. Now, it is possible to see even deeper Christianity, the Christian-specific, in our seminars' way of working. Let's listen one sentence from the Gaudium et Spes, Second Vatican Council's pastoral constitution. The joy and hope, the sorrow and trepidation of modern people, especially of poor and all those who are suffering, are also joy and hope, sorrow and trepidation of Christians' disciples. And there is nothing truly human that does not resonate in their hearts. Joy, green color marker, hope, yellow color marker, sadness, red color marker, and trepidation, purple color. In the concluding stage of the seminar, after collecting all the sheets on which the questions and opinions were written, the results of the democratic discussion and the change of perspectives, the participants of the project are to place a marker, each one of each color, where they identify joy, hope, sadness, and trepidation. This final task addressed to everyone will be to interpret, the final task addressed to everyone will be to interpret the resulting color mosaic. And this very act of expressing one's judgment in terms in which the Catholic Church has expressed its reference not only to the modern world, but to what is truly human, is a step toward ecumenical lived Christianity of tomorrow. For it turns out that followers of Islam tending to atheism, Catholic traditionalists, and just ordinary Christian can see reality in perspective that is not simply ecclesiastical, it's not about church, but is truly universal. This is how the church realized that it transcends itself. And without speaking against anyone's position on one's own faith or unbelief, it turns out that for both the Muslim and the atheist and the Christian, this Christianity lived differently becomes what it is. A sacrament, as it were, that is a sign of instrument of inner union with God and of the unity of the whole human race. This is from the Second Vatican Council, Lumen Gentium. I have time, or should I? Okay. I have only two things to add as a conclusion, okay? First, the question is if we can speak about all of this I was trying to describe and shortly analyze as a corrective experience. The corrective experience is the notion, psychological notion. American Psychological Association described this corrective experience this way. An experience through which one comes to understand an event or relationship in a different or unexpected way that results in emotional coming to terms with it. So the question is if we should not a little bit extend this definition from the one side, and from the other side we should probably make this definition a little bit narrower. Why? It is more than only emotions. There are the rational component, the emotional component. Better word would be existential experience. From the other point of view, this is not much enough. This is too short, too little to speak about corrective experience that is constant, that has its constant consequences. And the last thing I would like to say, one can critique, saying, for instance, that there is no, this is not a strategy against the threats to democracy or misuse of religion, but it's a kind of new egalitarianism. You are creating a community in which you are practicing something, playing with yourself. Well, my answer would be, you should start somewhere. You should simply create leaders of their own community, giving them not only a theory, but a concrete experience. In this point, I would like to say my greetings to Professor Maria Widl and Professor Anders Mate-Todd, who are leading these seminar groups in a mostly democratic way. And the second short criticism one can address to me, is it really a theological answer to the threats to democracy? It's not general enough, it's not a good sketch of horizon, it's not a theological answer, it's not a philosophical answer. Well, from the time of Wittgenstein, we have a very good deflationary theory in philosophy. Maybe the good point is to stop to inflate theories and start to deflate theories, and doing less would be to do more, actually. That would be my conclusion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Questions? In English, please.
Not in Dutch? Okay. Dutch. In English, yes. Thank you very much. Just a small question. It sounds very interesting, and I would like to participate in the seminar. You didn't speak about synodality, but it reminded me of the process in the Church of synodality. And then, so I was wondering, did you reflect on the similarities as well? And especially, would it be possible to view synodality also as a way to make Catholics more democratic? I don't think that this is expressed as such by the Pope, but maybe this is Catholics can become a better democratic citizens.
Okay, we collect all questions. We have 2 questions more. They were the last question.
Thank you very much, Patryk, for your stimulating talk. My question is, with your seminar, is there space for decision-making and way to focus on implementation of the ideas that are discussed? Because democracy is discussion, of course, but where ideas are going to be implemented in reality, that's where most tensions are raising. So that's my question.
Thank you as well for your speech presentation. That was very inspiring. I just cannot help but wonder, I cannot clearly catch these, the religious component in it. I mean, how you framed it and how you described it is for me very clearly a secular process that you came up with based on the idea that democracy needs practice and experience. And yes, I can hear and see how easily you can put like a lot of Christian context into it. The council's documents you quoted are a great example. But this is something that is up to one's mind. I mean, if he kind of wants to read it in this context, this religious context or not, it can be easily put into a secular context. And what kind of comes to my mind is that there are many concepts which I can read this way that are popular, and they're like promoting dialogue and democracy around the world. in various contexts, but they don't have like this clear religious background. So I'm thinking about, for example, of a method of dialogue and peace building by Nansen Center of Peace and Dialogue. I don't know if you're familiar with that, from Lillehammer in Norway. This is very interesting, that they use very similar framework as you described it here. And I'm thinking about, again, a somewhat different sphere of nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg as a way that that has this maybe Christian aspirations. It promotes democracy, but I just don't clearly see this religious component being an essential part of it. Thank you.
Start with the...
Okay, so can I stand up because I don't feel very comfortable sitting. Thank you very much. So, about your question. Linus Müller aus Erfurt, he addressed exactly this topic. We were discussing about church and democracy in context of the Catholic Church and democratization of the Catholic Church. Is it possible for the church to be more democratic or not? If yes, why yes? If not, why not? So the topic was on the stage, so to say. And Linus text will be also available. I would answer this way to your question. So the topic was on the stage. Now, the second question, could you repeat? Oh, okay. Well, in this project, it's mostly about the constructing of text, writing text, and deciding which text we are going to publish and which we are actually going not to publish. It's all discussed. It's not only a reviewed text, and someone decides, make decision, and the text is just published or not. We discuss every element we want to create and to discuss. But for sure, the very important experience for the young community is that there is indeed some place for authoritarian points in democracy, and it should be there. We are trying also to give such an experience. And this authoritarian or authoritative, maybe later, better point should serve rather to the community, not only themselves. That's how we do. Did I answer your question somehow? Okay. And it is not clearly religious, and it should not be. But let me add one sentence more. The religion is not about religion, and Christianity is not about Christianity. It's about God and His revelation, His love, and Jesus, as Christians believe, is His love incarnated. So we are trying to show the Christian universalism and universalism in general as a way of experiencing the living God. Not only by, the religious community strictly, or Christian message strictly. I said once to Professor Maria Widl eating dinner, I feel that my Vaterland is actually Christianity. And she answered me, I would say not Austria, but the kingdom of God. Thank you.